At 3:30 a.m. on August 31st, 1888, a carman made his way across Bucks Row in the neighborhood of Whitechapel, London. On the ground, in the darkness of night, he saw what he believed to be a tarp. Approaching it curiously, he soon realized that what lay before him was no tarp. Charles Allen Cross, horrified by what he saw, went to a police constable patrolling the neighborhood for help. When the police arrived at Cross's initial findings, their gaslit lanterns illuminated the body of Mary Ann Nichols. A surgeon by the name of Dr. Lewin was brought to the scene of the crime and determined that Mary Ann Nichols must have died only within the last 30 or so minutes from 2 knife wounds at her throat. The body was bruised as if she had been in an altercation with her assailant, but there were no other clues at the scene of the crime and no witnesses to be found. This was the 3rd murder to occur in Whitechapel in the last 5 months. The press began to consider that all of these murders were linked. Their suspicions only grew a week later when, on September 8th, the body of Annie Chapman was discovered on Hanbury Street, 2 deep cuts made to her throat. The bodies of Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly all followed within the next 2 months, in more horrific manners, including mutilation and disembowelment. These murders came after hundreds of letters of threats were sent to the police department, signed with different pseudonyms. While most of these letters were determined to be hoaxes, there were 3 that caught the police's attention, for they foretold the murders with such accuracy that it was possible that the killer had written them. Those letters were signed Jack the Ripper. The world's first serial killer is said to only have 5 known victims. However, in England during the late 19th century, the ability to investigate heinous crimes of this nature was insufficient, and Jack the Ripper was never found nor brought to justice. This is Watch Her Cook. Hello, everyone. I'm Cassie.
And I'm Danielle.
Welcome back to Watch Her Cook, a podcast dedicated to sharing the incredible lives of women who have taken their power back throughout history.
I really enjoyed your intro today because we can tie a little bit of personal experience to that location and kind of walking through different scenes of crimes, because we went on like a 6-hour Jack the Ripper walking tour when we were in London.
Yeah. We had a guide take us through and he showed us the exact locations where some of these women were found and murdered, and explained a lot of the situation surrounding the murders and what had happened. He was so detailed. Remember how good he was of a tour guide?
Yeah. I think when we signed up, it said expect a 3-hour duration. And we were there much, much later, which was fine because
it was so interesting.
He was so detailed with his explanations, not only of, I feel like because we do a lot of ghost tours and historic tours and things like that, sometimes they can lead more into the spooky and kind of like clickbaity version of history. But with him, he went deep into not only who Jack the Ripper could be, because, you know, that's what everybody wants to know, but more so about the women and their lives and what their day-to-day was. And I don't know, I just found it refreshing for such a dark situation. I found it really refreshing as far as just, I mean, we've just been on so many of them that they can kind of all blend together, but he was great.
Yeah, his was very memorable. He was animated, and you're right, he did focus a lot on the actual victims, where I think a lot of people focus on Jack the Ripper because it's such a mystery. And then after the tour, we went to, do you remember what the restaurant was called? It was called like
No, it was
like a burger and fry place.
No, it was fish and chips.
Oh, fish and chips.
Oh, Jack the Chipper.
Jack the Chipper, yeah. We went there after. We were on a Jack the Ripper theme, which is not the theme of this episode, just to let you all know. But as I alluded to at the end of that intro, is that with Jack the Ripper, there was never any type of system that really made it possible to find out who this person was. And that was pretty common throughout history, that there wasn't really a good way to investigate these crimes until a woman named Frances Glessner Lee came forward and she kind of reshaped it. So let's jump into her story.
Yeah, I love forensics, and that's what this episode is about. That's the tie-in.
Yes. As a wealthy socialite fascinated by the hidden truths of death, Frances Glessner Lee reshaped the way crimes were investigated. Through her creation of, quote, legal medicine at Harvard and her nationwide training of police officers, she introduced meticulous methods of preserving evidence, practices still at the core of modern forensics, though her name remains a mystery to many.
Frances Glessner Lee was born in Chicago on March 25, 1878, to a family of notable wealth. Her father, John Jacob Glessner, was a gold prospector in California during her childhood, but returned to the Midwest to open a branch of farm machinery manufacturing, which would eventually become known as International Harvester. Despite the income provided by his occupation, John Jacob Glessner was relatively absent in the lives of Frances and her brother George, who were raised by their mother, also named Frances. The Glessners were part of Chicago's upper class and enjoyed the luxuries of this lifestyle. Mr. Glessner's business was so successful that he built the family a home on the most prestigious residential street in the south side of Chicago, Prairie Avenue. The home was designed by famous American architect Henry Hobson Richardson and spanned over 13,000 square feet with massive outer walls creating a perimeter around a central courtyard. The home was so imposing that it prompted a neighbor to say, quote, "I do not know what I have ever done to have that thing staring at me in the face every time I go out of my door." Like, is that good or bad?
It feels bad. It's like, this house is ridiculous. Why was this built?
I imagine it like, speaking of walking tours and things like that, like I love a good walking tour of architecture in cities and things. And I've done quite a few of historic homes and things like that in like Cap Hill in Denver, and just looking at the old money homes of days gone by. And I feel like this is a house that would be on one of those tours. So I feel like it's definitely has a bad tone.
Yeah, but a 13,000 square foot house. That's ridiculous.
Imagine, and his house is like normal.
Just a normal house.
Huge
it's
house,
like, what is this?
Yeah.
Who needs, like, for context, my house is 2,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So it's over 6 times larger than my house. That's crazy. In early childhood, Frances developed tonsillitis. One doctor allegedly recommended a dangerous treatment involving rubbing the tonsils with cocaine and removing them with a knife, which horrified her mother. The family sought a second opinion where the use of ether, also dangerous at the time, was suggested. Some accounts show they ultimately opted for surgery with ether, which was successful. This experience sparked Frances's lifelong interest in the medical practice.
Not the cocaine.
Not the cocaine. Imagine your mom saying yes to that. Yeah, just
I mean, I don't know.
It was the time.
What's the time? I love how it's like removing them with a knife. It's like, I'm pretty sure that's how they're removed. No. Surgery is done with knives. Maybe
instead of a scalpel, it's with a knife. Like, I'm just picturing, for some reason, when I read that, I was picturing a butter knife and cocaine. Like, that's
a different scenario.
A dull knife and some cocaine and you'll be good to go.
Let's just open your mouth real quick.
That's why people hate the dentist, because they were doing shit like that.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like a generational trauma that's like passed down, an ancestral trauma that's like passed down as we evolve into
it's in our DNA. Do you have your tonsils?
Yes, I do.
Me too.
Yeah, I've never had any issues with them.
Me neither. My sister has gotten tonsillitis, I would say probably like 15 times.
Oof.
And the doctors have recommended that she take them out. But I heard as an adult, it's one of the most difficult routine surgeries to recover from the older you get for some reason.
Interesting.
So she's been really apprehensive about it. Maybe, did she get them? Wow, I feel like a bad sister. I feel like maybe she did do it. Either way, I know it was a whole thing, and maybe she should have just had cocaine and it would have been better. So if she hasn't, I'll recommend that.
Ask her and be like, did you try cocaine? That might fix your problem.
Or ether.
One or the other. Access to experimental learning was common for Frances, as she and her brother were homeschooled. Their father would hire private tutors for them to learn one-on-one in all subjects, from math and sciences to violin to languages such as French and German. Aside from her home in Chicago, Frances was also fortunate enough to spend summers at her family's summer home in New Hampshire. The house and its grounds had an apiary and several walking trails that wound through the White Mountains. As a result, curious Frances Glessner, who was lovingly named Fanny by her family, helping differentiating her from her mother, had a world of nature to explore and learn about.
In 1890, George went to Harvard to study law, which was not an option for Frances, as women were not to be admitted at the time. At Harvard, he befriended George Burgess McGrath, a preacher's son who was studying medicine. We'll refer to him as McGrath to distinguish between he and Frances's brother from now on. The two became very close friends, and George would bring McGrath home to visit the family, where he quickly became a routine visitor and close friends with Frances as well. When she turned 18 years old, Frances traveled to Europe with her aunt for 14 months, since there was no opportunity to study at the prestigious schools her family considered viable. It was common for women at the time and of her class to learn through this experience of travel rather than through study. While the trip showed her a great deal about the world, her journals at the time described that she had a dream of going to medical school, but felt it impossible due to her gender. When she got back from her trip, she married a man 11 years her senior, Blewett Harrison Lee. They were married in the Glessners' home and had the Chicago Symphony play during the reception. The Glessners were part of the committee that established the Chicago Symphony and contributed much of their wealth to the advancement of the arts in Chicago.
That whole trajectory of her story made me sad the way you read it, because it was like she couldn't go to school. She really wanted to go to school. Then she kind of did what a lot of people do now with a gap year, where you go out and travel and get life experience, which I do think is great. And I think that's awesome. But then it's like, but after she was done with that traveling experience, she came home and got married.
But wrote about how she dreamed of going to medical school.
Yeah.
But there is something to say also about, I feel like maybe that traveling the world and for that year and change kind of came secondary to school, and she maybe felt bummed out about that. But that still speaks to the privilege that she had, because I feel like other people in her position would be like, well, I'm a woman, I can't go to school, but I need to make money and earn a living, so I need to go right to work. Like, I can't just go around the world for 14 months.
Or I need to get married immediately and have someone provide for me.
Right.
Because I can't get a job that pays anything because I'm not allowed to go to school.
Yeah. So still, it's not great either way you slice it, but I don't know. I just think it's important to be like, okay, well, she still kind of had a good deal.
I wouldn't say a good deal. I mean, she's very privileged, and she has, I mean, a 13,000 square foot house she grew up in, and she's learning all these multiple languages from private tutors. But it's crazy that even with her privilege and all of her money, she's still not allowed to go to school because she's a woman.
To the schools that she wants to go to, like the prestigious Harvards and...
Yeah, but she's smart enough for it.
Yeah, she is. She's deserved of admission, yeah.
Well, going back to her husband, Blewett was a Southern Christian, and Frances's family was much more progressive and liberal, which led to a discrepancy of values in their relationship. Regardless, the expectation at the time would be for Frances to swallow her pride and make the marriage work. He was still a good man, and that was what mattered as far as her family was concerned. A year after their marriage, Frances had her first child, John. 5 years later, she had a daughter who she named Frances. And around this time, the existing strain on Frances and Blewett's relationship was reaching a boiling point, causing Blewett to move out of their home. Her family was upset by this news and convinced Frances to take him back. After she did what she was told, Frances and Blewett had a third child, Martha. However, the strain remained, and they eventually divorced.
I love how there's this tradition of naming the girls in the family Frances.
Yeah, it's cute.
You know, like usually it's the men that you get the juniors and seniors and the second, third. You know, I don't know. I just think it's a cool role reversal moment.
Frances the first, Frances the second.
During her childhood, it's said that Frances had a fascination with dollhouses and would create them out of materials she would find around the house and on its grounds. Watching her own children play with these structures again gave Frances an idea. For her mother's 65th birthday, Frances decided to make a diorama of the Chicago Symphony as a gift. Frances went to the Chicago Symphony several times to take notes and get everything just exactly right. This attention to detail was reflected in the final work, which wowed her mother and the party guests. Frances had replicated each member of the Chicago Symphony as an exact miniature, down to their hair color and style. The musical notation in front of these little performers was also painstakingly accurate, as each tiny piece of paper showed the exact bars and notes of the symphony's music book. It was clear that Frances's specialty was leaving no stone unturned. Inspired by the praise that she received for her mother's gift and reminded of her childhood hobby, she continued to make dioramas of orchestral performances that toured through Chicago.
That just shows how much she has attention to detail.
I could not.
To make exact replicas of literally anything would be hard.
Yeah. I feel like if I really, really tried, but it feels like this is coming more naturally to her.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't even a job at this point. Spoiler alert. We'll get there. But yeah, like, just as a gift.
I don't have the patience for that. I know for a fact I could not do it. Even if I tried really, really, really hard. I don't have the patience for it. I don't have the skill for it. It kind of shows to her character a little bit.
Yeah, and her talent, a natural ability.
Mm-hmm. Let's be honest, normal has changed. 20 years ago, your skincare routine was a bar of soap and maybe some apricot scrub. Now, serums, actives, slugging, red light therapy. But healthcare, it's still stuck in the past. You're told you're fine based on 20 basic markers. No hormones, no inflammation markers, no real insight. That's why I chose Function Health, because it's not just a test, it's a near 360-degree view of what's going on inside your body. Inside Function, you can test over 160 biomarkers, covering your heart, hormones, toxins, and more. You can even add multi-region MRI and CT scans for deeper insight. Everything's tracked securely in one place over time, giving you the power to finally see and understand what's happening inside your body. Function looks at things your regular doctor doesn't usually, like markers that affect your energy, mood, metabolism, and heart health. You'll finally get answers to things you might have been wondering about for years, all explained in simple, clear language so you actually know what to do next. When I got my Function results, I was blown away by how much they test for. Things like inflammation markers, stress hormones, and even advanced thyroid panels, testing things like your T3 free, T4 free, TPO antibodies, and more that measure how well your thyroid's actually working. These are things most standard labs don't include. Learn more and join using our link. The first 1,000 get a $100 credit towards their membership. Visit www.functionhealth.com/watchhercook or use gift code watchhercook100 at sign up to own your health. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I kept hitting this wall. I wanted to eat cleaner, more balanced meals, but I never had the time to plan everything out, let alone shop for it all. I'd end up ordering takeout or eating the same 3 things on repeat. That all changed when I found Hungry Root. It's like having a personal shopper and nutritionist rolled into one. Hungry Root learns your food preferences and health goals. Mine are gut health and anti-inflammatory, and then fills your cart with groceries and simple recipes that actually make sense for your life. The best part, most meals take 15 minutes or less, which is perfect for busy weeknights when I don't want to spend forever in the kitchen. And the food, it's so good. I've been getting things like the chickpea pasta, lemon dill salmon, green goddess salad kit, smoothies, and even clean snacks for in-between meals. I'm honestly saving hours every week, not having to think about what to cook, not going to the store, and using that time to rest, read, or just breathe. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/watchhercook and use code watchhercook. That's hungryroot.com/watchhercook. Code watchhercook to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/watchhercook. Code watchhercook. In the 1930s, when her children went off to college and began to start their own families, Frances was recovering from surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital. She stayed in a prestigious wing of the hospital, known as Phillips House, and was surprised to see her old friend staying there at the same time, George McGrath. Frances had been following McGrath's career from afar, hearing tales from her late brother. McGrath had been working as a medical expert in crime cases throughout the country, becoming an expert on ballistics and blood spatter. This then niche science was known as legal medicine, and McGrath was America's foremost blazer in the discipline. McGrath had also been outspoken in publications about how the political designation of coroners throughout the United States was unethical. He argued that police precincts should have medical experts performing autopsies instead of appointed officials, and that there should be a ledger of shared information for them to refer to when they are trying to solve murders.
Reuniting with McGrath reignited the child within her, the one who had been fascinated with medical sciences and dreamed of being a doctor, but was told that, because she was a girl, she should just get married and raise a family instead. She therefore decided it was time to make a change.
I just love that that person was always there. Like her family told her she needed to get married, have kids. And underneath it all, as soon as her kids leave the house, she's like, okay, I'm back. This passion has never died and I have to do it somehow. It was always there.
Yeah, it was just kind of this like smoldering ember that just took one outside spark to reignite a real passion that's going to turn into like a new life's purpose. And it's just like a returning to yourself. A former version of herself.
Yeah.
And I think we can all relate to that in like one way or another, maybe not to this degree, but just in different things, like small things in my own life. When I think of, when I was a kid and a young adult, in my teenage years, I loved to read. Like I loved reading. It was my thing. It was my outlet. I remember being in elementary school and going down into the basement of my public library because that's where the kids section was.
That's how mine was too.
Yeah. And in the summer and going and getting the little handouts, and you would get stickers each time you turned in a book that you had read. And at the end of the summer, if you read a certain amount of books, you get like a little prize, and just like that whole thing and how much joy that brought me. And then as soon as I was a teenager and into my early 20s, I completely dropped reading and writing because it felt more of just like this chore, I think, because it was so closely associated with school. And I just felt like it was work, and it just killed.
Well, you already have to do it so much.
Yeah. And it just kind of killed it for me. I was just like, I don't know. I don't want to do more of this. And I don't know. It just kind of sputtered out. But over the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, as I entered my 30s, I really picked it up again in a way that I let go for a while, and I just feel so much better. Like my favorite type of night is having a great day outside, doing whatever, maybe going to a bookstore, and then coming back and being able to settle into my couch and read. Like that's just so great and fun for me and fulfilling.
Yeah.
And it's just nice to return to that instead of it feeling draining.
And it just shows that things that you enjoy in life, you're probably not ever going to stop enjoying just because life kind of takes over and you have to do other things. It's like you enjoyed these things when you were a child, and now here you are as an adult later in life. Yeah. And they're still the same things that you enjoy.
Yeah. Well, Frances was afforded the opportunity to shadow McGrath to an autopsy and understand his processes. Impressed by his work, she decided that something needed to be done to standardize the way that murders were solved in the United States. She realized that she had the resources and the connections to make an impact. An excerpt from her diary reads, quote, "I didn't do a lick of work to deserve what I have. Therefore, I feel I have been left an obligation to do something that will benefit everybody."
Now in her 50s, Frances spent time learning more about anatomy, using McGrath's extensive knowledge as a resource to support her own learning. She decided to leverage her family's good favor and approach Harvard, where she proposed that they make legal medicine its own area of study, taught by George McGrath. She offered to donate $250,000 to help them develop the George Burgess McGrath Endowment for Legal Medicine. This would expand the science department and create a collection of unique books and resources for Harvard students to learn about legal medicine, just as she had. Making sure her money was well spent, Frances took it upon herself to keep up with the university's progress in creating this course and its extensive library. She also knew that her status as a donor gave her much power, and so she took it upon herself to contact J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI, to convince him that his agents needed to be trained in legal medicine at Harvard's laboratories.
In 1938, George McGrath suddenly passed away. Harvard replaced him with Dr. Alan Moritz, who oversaw the organization of the developing department. In February of 1940, Harvard announced the start of legal medicine as a course provided generously by the, quote, donor, never naming Frances in their publications. Dr. Moritz assisted with several police files. In some cases of death that the police had deemed accidental or suicide, Moritz was able to use his training of legal medicine to determine that they were in fact murder. But much of the local law enforcement were resistant to the entrance of these educated outsiders coming in and making them look like fools. The truth, however, is that police often compromised crime scenes. The current standards we have today, thanks to initiatives run by people like Frances, were not yet in place. It was not unusual for evidence to be inadvertently destroyed, or for crucial information to be obscured by lack of care. This much larger issue with America's police force gave Frances another idea.
Beginning in New Hampshire, Frances began to go around to police departments to present seminars on legal medicine, training officers on the scientific perspective of crime scene investigation. From her work, the New Hampshire police designated her as a captain within the police force, making her the first woman in America to hold this title. Success in New Hampshire led her to begin these seminars in neighboring states as well as in Chicago. At the time, Frances was 60 years old and her health was wavering. She chose to continue her work anyway, figuring that resting at home would do nobody any good. She continued to tour police departments throughout the United States, assessing the crime-solving practices of each precinct, and after evaluation, deciding whether or not they required a one-week training course.
Realizing the clear, widespread need for education, Frances was inspired to bring another element of her childhood back into her later years. With her spare time, Frances developed dioramas of crime scenes, ensuring the detail would be just as precise as they were on her mother's 65th birthday gift. With the assistance of a carpenter, Frances created what are known today as the nutshell studies of unexplained death. However, these nutshell dioramas were not intended to be a hobby. Frances created these entirely for the purposes of education. To her, it was more important than ever to ensure that each and every single detail of the miniature was an accurate reflection of the crime scene that inspired it.
The models were commended for attention to detail, as Frances made an effort to get blood spatter patterns correct, to color the bodies so that they resembled the exact time of death of the victim, and to even put tiny bullet holes in walls and floors at precise angles. All of these elements proved to be an incredibly reliable way to test the observational skills of homicide detectives. Even items of the room that were unrelated to the murder were still done with Frances's notorious touch of perfectionism. She would replicate oil paintings at a small scale, create hand-rolled cigarettes and burn them at the tip, knit small clothing for the victim to wear, include their underwear. The list goes on.
These dioramas became an essential part of how Frances would instruct and evaluate the police officers she visited. First, she would teach them a myriad of technical, scientific details about crimes, and then give the officers 90 minutes to look at the given diorama and take all the information they could. The goal was never to come to a definitive conclusion, but to train the officers to understand how crucial untampered crime scene investigation was. The nutshells are alleged to have cost Frances thousands of dollars to make, an incredibly steep price in the 1940s, but she saw it as the greatest use of wealth she inherited. However, when it came to the courses themselves, Frances still thought it right to charge the individual states and their police departments, noting that giving the lectures for free would diminish her expertise, especially since no women were working in the field at the time.
Officers who took her courses were given certificates and lapel pins with Harvard's name on them, providing a further sense of credence to the education she provided. It also created a network of officers who were all privy to the same information and planted the seed for standardizing crime scene investigation in the United States, just as Frances had intended. And I do have to say, if you guys listening have not seen these dioramas that she creates, look them up because they are so interesting. It is like the most morbid dollhouse you've ever looked at. She paints the exact crime scene and it looks like a dollhouse. But then you look at it closer and you're like, wait, there's a horrific murder in the middle of this dollhouse.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things that I think about this. Number one, it's impressive, of course, the attention to detail that you kind of outlined and the painstaking process of creating these dioramas and all the detail. But also you have to think like she's taking this from real life scenarios and she's studying very graphic crime scene photos and kind of like the mental toll that probably took on her to some degree. I know somebody has to do it, right? I mean, people in this work are better at compartmentalizing certain things than others, but I don't know. It's still awful. It's still pretty intense. So that's the first thing I think of is like, oh my God, the amount of time to just like be staring.
Yeah, and to have to hone in on very specific details like the blood spatter or whatever it is. I know just with our own research when we have to research gruesome cases and know the details, but to actually be staring at those details for a really long period of time must have been clearly very interesting to her, but also difficult.
And then also the other portion of this, talk about responsible wealth. I mean, she said herself in that excerpt that I read a little bit ago about, you know, she's like, I didn't work for, like, I came into money and I'm very aware of that. And I feel like I need to do the best that I can with that.
If only everyone felt that way.
Can you imagine what
like
this
the
world could be if I see one more mega yacht?
It's like if all these people who had billions of dollars would just be like, you know, maybe other people should have food.
Just a thought.
Just to put it out there, you know?
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
That would be great for millions of people.
And when you're literally a billionaire, that's like pennies for you.
Yeah. And not only is she, that's a whole other conversation because not only is she using her wealth in a positive, meaningful way, she's also doing it herself. She could have donated her money to Harvard and kind of wiped her hands and been like,
and went to her Pilates classes and her tea parties and
right,
and called it a day. Yeah, but she's like she's out in the field and she is traveling the world. She's working
putting
very
on
hard.
seminars to like different local law enforcement and around New Hampshire, you know, our home state, which is also a cool tie-in. Cool. But yeah, I don't know. There's also something about that of wanting to be hands-on, involved, passionate, not just somebody who writes a check. So
yeah,
there's that too.
Well, jumping back into her story and her holding these seminars and people getting their pins and she's becoming more legitimate. With more states on board, the press began to report this emerging field of study and its roots of education being a, quote, macabre old rich woman who was, quote, obsessed with murder. News of her courses became more widely known and piqued the interest of Earl Gardner, author of the Perry Mason detective series. Making some calls and asking for favors, Gardner was able to attend one of Frances's courses and confidently introduce himself. Unexpectedly, Frances criticized him for his portrayal of police as foolish in his work. This boldness eventually led to a friendship between the two, and the takeaways he learned from Frances had a large influence on Gardner's future novels.
Just so nice. It's like, hey, I know that I'm involved with educating police officers and maybe pointing out some faults of what they could have done better and how to do better, but they're still like deserve respect and shouldn't be portrayed in this way. So I think that's pretty cool too.
Well, and for him to show up like confident that he knew what he was talking about and her to be like, your writing's horrendous. This is correct. And him being like, oh, let me take your opinion and experience to heart and not be offended by it.
He even dedicated his book, The Case of the Dubious Bridegroom, to Frances and mentioned her in the foreword, saying, quote, I am not going to have any of Mrs. Lee's graduates appearing in my books. Such an officer would not only solve the crime as soon as the hero could, but he just might be 100 or so pages ahead of the procession.
See, he learned.
He did. When you know better, you do better. With novels like Gardner's, it had become apparent that the public's fascination with solving murder was beginning to rise. Frances decided to leverage the genre's popularity in hopes it would inspire younger minds to choose legal medicine as a career path. She approached MGM Studios with a pitch for a film that would recount a recent murder that had taken place in Boston. The studio eventually released Mystery Street in 1950, with a lead character inspired by Harvard's legal medicine professor Dr. Alan Moritz. Frances was not portrayed or credited in the film, but her vision helped shape its scientific realism.
She approaches them with this idea and then is not credited for it at all. I'm not surprised. I just wanted to extra point that out.
Yeah. Underline that, highlight it.
Yeah.
Noted.
But I do think it's interesting that even you're talking about in 1950, there's still film and TV that is surrounding murder. And I think it's really interesting to look at how much the world is kind of obsessed with true crime and murder. Why I know we've talked about this before on the podcast, but why do you think people are so interested?
I don't know. It's deeply rooted in psychology somewhere. I'm sure there's a very succinct answer to that, which I am not going to be able to convey. But for my own personal brain, I feel like I'm interested in murder because it's just, I can't envision a world in which I would commit that crime. So I want to try and understand how somebody else could.
Yeah, it feels so out of the norm of behavior.
And obviously there's certain circumstances in, I don't know, you're defending yourself or whatever. And I feel like we're also on this same page of, especially going back to the intro with Jack the Ripper, like these serial killer random crimes that, I don't know, it's those types of ones that I think really capture the fascination of people because it feels so shocking. And I don't know, like the very basic level for me, it's just kind of like, how in the world would your mind go to that? And how could you ever do something like that? I want to understand it.
Yeah. I think as women, there's also another element to be who are these? Because women are often the people who are the victims. I think as a woman, there's also this intrigue of how are they doing this? Why are they doing this? Who are they targeting? And how can I be safer? So to know, for me, I think of the same thing that you're talking about, just the intrigue of this is so out of the norm and I could never envision this for myself. But also there's this other step of, okay, what are they doing? Where do I need to be vigilant? And I think a lot of these stories is where we're okay, don't stare at your phone when you're in a parking lot, walking to your car alone. Make sure you don't park in an alleyway. Make sure you're on a brightly lit street. Make sure people know where you are. And I think all of that information comes from consuming true crime stories. So I think there's an element of self-preservation in learning these as well. Do you think you have to spend big bucks or hours in the kitchen to make a good meal at home? Think again. I've been using EveryPlate, and let me tell you, this is one of the easiest ways to get restaurant-level meals at home without the stress of the price tag. EveryPlate meals are packed with flavor, and the portions are super generous. I've been absolutely loving how easy and delicious their vegetarian recipes are, like their spicy chickpea stew and cheesy Mexican street corn hash. It's flavorful, satisfying, and totally fresh. EveryPlate delivers everything you need right to your door, so you spend less than you would on groceries or takeout. Plus, the recipes are simple and ready in 30 minutes or less, which is perfect for busy schedules. If you want to eat better, enjoy variety, and save time without breaking the bank, I use EveryPlate, and you should too. What are you waiting for? Dig into these flavor-packed meals your household will love. New customers can enjoy this special offer of only $1.99 a meal. Go to everyplate.com/podcast and use code WatchHerCook199 to get started. Applied as discount on first box, limited time only.
We're all chasing something. Step count goals, a promotion, or maybe just a vibe. Let's not let bad socks and blisters ruin it all. Bombas makes socks and now slides and seamless essentials that keep up with whatever you're up to, whether you're running an entire marathon or just a few errands. They have socks that wick sweat, help you keep cool, and fight blisters for whatever you're up to. Running, playing sports, hiking, or just a hot girl walk. And they don't stop at socks. They've got fresh white tees, waterproof slides, which I personally love for camp showers, and buttery soft, sweat-wicking underwear that feels barely there. As someone who travels almost every month, I can personally attest to their compression socks as well, which I always have on hand for flights. But best of all, Bombas isn't just about feeling good. They do good. One purchased equals one donated to someone who needs it. Because I hike so much, it's a must that my socks hold up to the trails, and I get that with Bombas. I also love their underwear because I want to feel as free and comfy as possible when outdoors or lounging on my couch afterwards. And their undies are so soft, they seamlessly go from trail to TV time. Head over to bombas.com and use code AUDIO for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com, code AUDIO at checkout. Bombas.com and use code AUDIO. Well, around the time of Mystery Street's release, Moritz stepped down from his position at Harvard and was replaced by Dr. Richard Ford. Ford, however, was not as enthusiastic about developing the science and rubbed Frances the wrong way. She attempted to convince Harvard to find somebody else, but now in her 70s, felt as though Harvard was not taking her complaints seriously. Frances believed that they merely entertained her so that they could secure some of her estate when she passed. From her perspective, not enough action was taken. Harvard seemed to care less and less about the department she had funded and were outspoken about their dislike of blue-collar police officers being brought to campus for seminars and lectures. Frustrated with their classism and feeling like her voice was no longer respected, Frances chose to withdraw the active funding she provided them. Shortly after this, Frances became ill and it was impossible for her to continue traveling and teaching. Believing she was nearing the end of her life, she established a foundation to ensure that her lectures and precious nutshell dioramas would continue to be used for educational purposes long after she passed.
Frances passed away in January of 1962 from cancer at her home in Bethlehem, New Hampshire. Her funeral was attended by police officers from several neighboring states. A eulogy was written for her by Earl Gardner, where he states, quote, "My friend Captain Frances G. Lee had a keen brain, a big heart, and an open mind. Because she had an orderly mind and a logical mind, she was able to comprehend police work in a way that enabled her to make a shrewd and accurate appraisal of individual cases, as well as an overall planning of what was being done and an accurate estimate of what should be done. Because she had a great big human heart, a warm understanding, and the approach of a woman of highly developed maternal instincts, she not only adopted the cause of legal medicine and law enforcement as an intellectual pursuit, but she came to regard the men in the law enforcement as her boys, and they in turn gave her respect and affection, which brought about a warm human relationship." Frances left nothing to Harvard in her will, reflecting her disappointment in the university's shifting priorities. While the Department of Legal Medicine was eventually dissolved, her influence endured. Today, her famous nutshell studies of unexplained death are still used to train police officers in observational skills and crime scene analysis, continuing the mission she devoted her life to.
In 1959, a few years before her passing, legal medicine had largely evolved into what we now recognize as forensic pathology. Forensic science is now the name for the discipline that George McGrath and Frances Glessner Lee founded. Today, Frances is often referred to as the mother of forensic science. Though forensics has become a very important part of crime investigation throughout the world, to this day, there is still no standardized method for post-mortem medical examination in the United States, since most states have their own individual laws and rules surrounding the practice.
There is also difficulty attracting new medical students to forensic studies because the salaries are significantly lower than those that practice other kinds of medicine, especially in the U.S. Still, forensic science has had its moment in the media, with crime procedurals being a staple in television throughout the last 60 years.
Forensic science has made a significant difference on how murders are solved, and this is thanks to the dedication of Frances. Her meticulous creation of the nutshell studies of unexplained death laid a foundation for modern techniques that are used today to help bring justice to the right people and ensure that less innocent people are wrongfully convicted.
Wow, what a story.
I mean,
so interesting.
It's just so cool because, you know, thinking back to different junctures in life and wondering what your life would be like if you turned right instead of left. And, you know, I went to the University of New Haven for a campus tour because I was really interested in doing their forensic program before I decided to go to Keene State for biology. And I was so interested in forensics and still am, but I was very close to going there to study that. And I wonder if that would have been part of the curriculum, you know, learning about her or using one of her dioramas or something like that. Just like, I wonder if that would have been part of my studies there, and what like a full circle moment that would have been. And
although you probably wouldn't be telling her story right now on a podcast if you had
you
taken
never
that
know.
path.
You never know.
You never know. Yeah, it's cool to have a tie-in to New Hampshire too, because that was something that I did not know previously. So I think it's cool to, when we were telling the story, to mention places that we know.
Yeah. And also, lastly, good on her for pulling her funding from Harvard.
Yeah.
The disrespect.
Truly. Come on.
It's like, okay, she funded your program for years and was such a supporter and advocate of the university. And then you start phasing her out and kind of brushing her aside as soon as she gets older, and you feel like you can take advantage of her and just use her for money. She's like, okay, I don't think so.
I don't think so. I'm still supplying the money. Yeah. I think you forgot that.
Yeah. But anyway, I enjoyed her story, and I, just like you said, I encourage people to look up pictures of the dioramas because they are so unique. And it, now knowing the background of her life and how just different interests merged into their creation, like it was a childhood hobby, and then it was something that she just kind of did as a gift for her mom, and then but she had this interest in medicine, and just kind of combining those different threads to weave this into existence. And maybe thinking, you know, just because you have what you may think of as scattered interests, you never know how they could come together and make some sort of difference, like she did.
Maybe your future job doesn't even exist yet, and all of your little talents that you're pulling together throughout life are going to come together one day.
Yeah, you just have to create it.
No pressure. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in to Watch Her Cook.
If you're looking to dive a little deeper into Frances's story, we've dropped some sources for you in the description. Let us know what incredible women's stories you'd like to hear next.
And a big shout out to Sick Bird Productions, who produces our podcast and helps bring these stories to life. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Watch Her Cook Podcast, leave a review, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Just a reminder, empowered women empower the world. Now let's go cook. See you next Wednesday.